have 9 brothers and 1 sister, and we had a nice large family. My dad had to work all his life, but he took a lot of time with the family. We had a good time. I went to St. Pete High School, graduated from there, and during my high school, last 2 years in high school, I was also in the National Guard, Florida National Guard. So I was able to go to summer camp with them to Alabama, Fort McPherson, Alabama, and one to Camp Blanding in Jacksonville, and 2 summer camps I went to. And then from there I just went into the Army after school. I went into the Army because my father had to work all his life, and he had been in the Army, and he tried to get back in, but he had too many dependents. So when I went in there, my idea was if I wanted to change jobs, because there's so many different things to do in the service, that I could change jobs without losing my pay or having to hunt for another place to go to work. So I really enjoyed the Army. I was in the first when I first went into basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I was there for 8 weeks, and then 16 weeks of advanced training. I was in the first class, and I went to Korea. Korea, had just signed a basic kind of truce thing, and I was sent to the 1st Cavalry Division, 2nd of the 7th Gary Owens. My company commander happened to be a West Point captain, Captain Brodsky. He was a real mentor to me. I was a corporal at that time, and I was his Jeep driver and radio operator. He was very good to the troops, all of them, treated them all well, talked a lot of them into staying in the service, even though it was an infantry outfit. He persuaded me to get into something else outside the infantry when I came back. And I went into the MPs at Fort Gordon, Georgia. Graduated from there. I did a lot of correspondence courses and things, working towards a college degree. And I came to Fort Jackson, South Carolina again as an MP. I was there for 5 years at Fort Jackson. So that gave me a total of almost 7 years in the service. At that time, I kept going to school, and finally I went to the Criminal Investigation Division, which is like the Army FBI. I went to that school, got badge and credentials, and they're signed by General Turner, who was one of the best provost marshals in the Army. He was like on the Chief of Staff's board. And I went to Germany from there. I was in Germany, in Stuttgart, Germany, in the 7th Army Command. I was in the 52nd CID unit, stationed in Stuttgart. Things started happening in the Army then. This was like in 64, 65. Drugs became pretty prevalent, marijuana and stuff like that in the service. My caseload went from like 7 a month to 35, and there wasn't any real help coming into that division or that type of work, criminal investigation work. So I was getting some of the same people during the month for 2 or 3 offenses with marijuana, and it was time for me to re-enlist. So I said, man, I'm going to get out of this job, and I put in for aviation at that time. And Vietnam started like in 64, they started sending advisors to Vietnam. So everybody told me, well, if you go into aviation, you're going to Vietnam right away. And I said, well, whatever it is. So I went to Fort Walters, Texas, basic training in the helicopter. I was there for 3 months. From there, I went to Fort Rooker for advanced training for 3 months. And in July, my class number is 67-3, and I still have my ring. And I went, in July, I went to Vietnam. ended up in Chu Lai, Vietnam in the 71st Aviation Unit. It's 14th Combat Group, 1st Aviation Brigade, signed to the Marical Division. And General Baldwin at that time was a commander. And I served 1 year flying Chinooks, Hueys and gunships, Charlie models. And we didn't have the H model at that time. We had the D models. And after one tour in Vietnam, it was pretty exciting. I was there for the first TET. I got all the way up to Hue with our unit. We supported some ground units up in Hue. And then my tour ended in July the next year, which is 68. I came home. I went to Fort Rucker, Alabama as an instructor pilot for a year. I taught instrument training and also advanced some of the things we learned in Vietnam, for flying. I taught some of that. And in 1 year, Zoom, I was back in Vietnam again. And I went to the same unit. I was very lucky. I even got the same place I lived before. Same hoops, so I didn't have any decorating to do. It was all decorated already. And one of my buddies, Nate Willondak, I'd like to mention his name because he decided if I was going, he'd go. And I met him the first tour. We were together first tour and the second tour. And something happened psychologically to Nate. He decided he didn't want to fly anymore. I don't know whether it was one of the bad experiences that he's had. He was getting a crewman shot and everything in the mission. He saw one of the aircraft go down and crash and burn, and I think he just wanted to quit flying. So we went into the supply room, but he stayed for his year. I extended for 6 months. I got to go fly for the general division because I was an instrument examiner at the time. I went to fly for the division, and he asked me to stay for 6 months. I went ahead and signed up for another 6 months. Of course, you get a free 30-day leave, so I came home for 30 days, went back. I spent another 6 months there flying. I made one mistake in the Army, to me, was I had an opportunity to go home with General Baldwin when he left the division. He went to West Point as a commander, and he asked me if I wanted to go to West Point. Well, I didn't know there was an aviation unit at West Point at that time, and I wanted to stay in flying. So I decided I'd go to Fort Hood, Texas instead, where there was a division, aviation division, first cav, matter of fact. And so I passed up an opportunity to go to West Point and even get more schooling and a good degree, but I missed out on that. I didn't know it at the time. So I spent 5 years at Fort Hood, and then I came up on for rotation, and they wanted me to go to Korea, so I went to Korea again, and I flew for General Barnes in the 2nd Infantry Division, which was good. I got to play a lot of golf, carry around a radio in case he called me, and one of them little GE things, and got to play a lot of golf, and had a lot of fun on that tour. And I got to take my family over there. I was married at that time to a girl from Georgia. Anyway, our family was over there. We had a good time. We got to do a lot of visiting, and their culture was a shock to her, but I'd been to Korea before. After Korea, my mother-in-law had cancer, so I got to come home like a month early. And I came back, and they wanted me to stay in. I told them no, I was ready to get out. I had 22 years in. It's time to get out. Okay, the first day I was there for orientation in the division, we got rocketed on the beach, and that was pretty scary for the first time you're over there. The rockets that they had that time were very primitive. All they did was they shot them off. They didn't know exactly where they were going. So they're just as dangerous not knowing as it was knowing. So all of our hooches had a bunker next to them. So the hooches themselves also were, like these Quonset huts you see around, the metal buildings. Well, that's what we lived in over there, were Quonset huts. And outside, they were bunkered about halfway up, but you had to, with the heat and everything, you had to have them ventilated, so we had screens down both sides, to let the air through. But we did have a bunker outside that was completely covered. So if the alarm went off, you went out in the bunker, put your vest on, your steel pot. And some of the missions that we flew were pretty scary. The worst was when we went into Quinyon Valley up near Khe Sanh. During Tet, I saw 2 buddies get killed. Their aircraft went in. I never knew if anybody in my aircraft ever killed anybody, but we sure shot a lot of rounds. Because flying, you don't get to actually see the ground. You're like allowed maybe down to 600 feet or something. But mostly you flew around 1,500 feet to keep out a small arms fire, but you still got hit every once in a while. So I brought in an aircraft one time that had 20 entry spots, about 40 exit wounds, or where the bullets go out. The rounds they shoot over the Cosmolov is a copper-coated steel casing, and the copper rips off when it goes through the first hole, and then the steel goes on through the other side. So, maintenance man was pretty upset that he had to patch that many holes. I lost one of my roommates over there, a good boy. He was from Clemson, Barry Alexander. I went to the wall, the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. He's on the panel there. He was my roommate, and I had to go through all his stuff and send it home. And when I went back to Fort Rooker, I went to visit him. His dad is a car dealer in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And if ever you wanted a son, Barry would have been one. Yeah, I understand when I went to Vietnam, I was 37 years old, and I already had like 10 and a half years in the service. So I was like a father to a lot of these guys, because they were maybe 1 year out of college or 1 year, 2 years out of high school, going through being pilots. And a lot of the kids were really younger than I was, but they were good pilots. They were good friends. We had a lot of fun together. We did each tour you get 2 R&Rs. I was able to go to Australia, Taipei, Hong Kong. I went to Thailand. So I got to see some more of the country, or the world, while I was over there. I earned quite a few medals while I was there. I got a Distinguished Flying Cross. I got a Bronze Star with a star. I have a Meritorious Service Medal. An Air Medal is 69. You get an Air Medal for 25 hours of combat, and I left there with 2,019 hours of combat flying. I have a Army Commendation Medal, a National Defense Medal, a Good Conduct Medal. You get that when you're an EM with 3 knots. So that was 9 years of service. That's when I volunteered and went into the aviation program. And I got the Vietnam Service Medal, the Bronze Star with 4 clusters, and a Vietnam Service Medal. senior aviation badge, and I was expert in pistol and a rifle. And I earned a Provost Marshal's 45 trophy when I was in the MPs. I was going to mention something about California when I first came home from Vietnam. You can use it or you can cut it out, whatever. But we got off the bus or off the plane in San Francisco to get on the Army bus, and we got egged, and the cops wouldn't do anything about it, and they wouldn't let us do anything about it. And I just had bought a brand new pair of TWs to come home in because all we had over there were flight suits and fatigues in Vietnam, and I was able to get a hold of a brand new set of TWs, and they got ruined with the eggs, and had to fly all the way home with that uniform on because that's all the clothes I had. Protesters about Vietnam, and my buddy and I both got egged, and we asked to go over there and take care of it, and they said no, they wouldn't let us. But both of us got egged, but there was more people. They must have thrown 3 dozen eggs at the whole busload as they were getting off. After the war, I got out in January '79. My mom and dad were living in Melbourne, Florida at the time. I came to Melbourne, and we stayed in an apartment for 3 months, and then I found a good place. I met an Air Force captain who was going to Luke Air Force Base to get into F-14s, and he was in a Volkswagen, and he was putting a sign out for a house for sale. I bought it. We moved there. I stayed in Melbourne for a while. I went to work at Harris for a while. They were building electronics towers for Saudi Arabia, and then that fell through. I didn't work there. I worked there about 6 months, I guess. Then I went to a hospital. 3 doctors were going to buy a helicopter for medical evacuation, and I was going to fly their helicopter, but 3 months after I built them a helipad and everything on daily pay or hourly wages, built them a $95,000 what the pad would be right if they had to pay for it. And then I decided, well, I'll just play golf and retire. I think today that some students really ought to look at a career in the service. I think if they have the very good grades, apply for West Point or one of the service academies. It doesn't have to be, you can be the Air Force or the Navy. I think the Navy has the best promotional program in the services. But there are some really good jobs today, especially for people that are geared to electronics and all this new gadgetry that's coming out. Technology is something. It's really, we're going to have unmanned fighters pretty soon. So things are really changing, and if you're sharp in electronics, there's all types of jobs in every facet of the services today. And it's not a bad job. But, you really feel good about doing something for your country. I still feel that way. And I love the USA. God bless us. Well, I had a lot of fun in the service. I only had 2.5 years of service time in combat. But at the time, a lot of the guys were getting out of the service and going to Canada and things like that. They were turning in their commissions and getting out. But with the service they had given me before, I felt it was my duty to go ahead and fulfill my obligation, and I stayed in, and I was rewarded for it. I had some bad days, some hard days, lost some good buddies. I just feel good about being in the service. We went on a big air assault. I saw, I would say, was 2 miles of helicopters lined up on a road. We were taking an ARVN division into up near Pleiku. The most helicopters I've ever seen in one place. I've never saw that many at Fort Rooker, but there they were. And we loaded up an ARVN division and their you know, we had Army advisors with them and things like that, and we took them to in here. And I volunteered for the smoke ship, which is where you go into an LZ and you smoke around the LZ so that when they come in, the enemy can't really see them or anything. And the smoke is, it stays there because it's like a real heavy fog. It's a mixture of kerosene and oil, and you pump it through your engine and it clouds the area. So when the airplanes come in, they can unload all their people and take less fire and everything and get in and out. But we were told, you know, where the enemy was really that they were coming in to get and which way you're supposed to fly in there. Well, there was a couple of guys that flew the wrong way and they flew right into some 50 ammo, some 51 fire and got shot down, and they were on fire even before they hit the ground, and there was no way to get anybody out. So they had a full load of troops and full load of gas and everything. One of them just burst into flames before it hit the ground. The other one was on fire and didn't explode till it hit the ground. So nobody got out, either one of them. That's a lot of people. I tried flying when I got out. That's so funny that you asked that. I tried flying, but I had to pay for an examiner because I was an instrument examiner with a commercial license. So I had to hire an FAA instructor, had to hire the helicopter, had to pay for the gas, and had to pay for the hours that I flew. So it was costing me like $1,000 or more to get a check ride every 3 months. And if you don't have a job, it's hard to do it. So I had to give it up. But I did have a job offer with the mosquito department in Melbourne, or Brevard County. And they had an old 34, which is a radial engine in the front. It's one of the old big ones that has 2 landing legs out front and a big tail. And I don't know if I have a picture of it or not. But I went there to look at it, and it had more engine oil on the outside than it did in the engine in the oil reserve. Had more. And I said, no thanks, I don't think I want this job. And 2 weeks later, in the paper, there's a picture of it laying on its side in Lake Washington, and the pilot's climbing out the window. Oh my gosh. So I'm glad I didn't take that job. Anyway, that was only, I put in to fly with a medevac unit in Orlando, but the company was from St. Louis, Missouri, and they sent people down from Missouri to fly, so there weren't any job openings in Florida for that. So that's my only aviation. It costs a lot of money to fly. There's no doubt about it. So I still have a commercial license, but it's not much good other than a piece of paper. And so I'd have to go to work for a company and get checked out again and everything. While we were at Fort Hood, Texas, I have a couple of stories. I was an instrument examiner. We're flying Chinook, so we'd take 2 or 3 guys and we'd go to New Orleans on instrument flight from Fort Hood, Texas. We'd take one pilot over. They'd spend the night in New Orleans, and me and my buddy would fly for PHI Helicopters, which is a commercial outfit because we had the license, and we'd go out to an oil rig and sit on an oil rig for a day for $1,000. They sit out there a day, $1,000 a day, sit there in case something happens, they bring somebody back, and that was good. We did that a couple of times, but one morning it was very, very foggy. We left our airplane, the Chinook, at New Orleans Naval, and we got PSI come pick us up, and we took it out there. But their aircraft didn't have much avionics like the Army does, and we had an AM radio, and it was so foggy, we had to get back to get our guys to get back to Fort Hood, Texas, and we were late that day, and the old man said, I think, the old man referring to the commander, he says, you guys are good guys and all that, and I know you're having fun, but we're going to have to quit these trips to New Orleans. So that was the end of that. But that was some extra duty money. There are some fun things. I was also, when I was at Fort Hood, Texas, I was in charge of the contingent that went to the the Texas State Fair in Dallas. I was able to go up there and coordinate where the aircraft were going to go, what kind of exhibits we were going to have, and I was able to take my wife up there, and I've got tickets to the Cotton Bowl, to the grand ball function that they have there with all the people. Took my dress blues, had a lot of fun there. It was a whole week of festivities, and it was really a lot of fun. And the kids that would get in the airplanes, you know, we had a Chinook there, had a Cobra there, we had a Huey there, we had a Kiowa, which is a 209 Bell, like the news people fly. That was our scout ship. And we had an 086, was one of the little round birds. I took the early morning shift where we come out, wipe all the windows down, get the dew off, and we'd do a pre-flight on the aircraft, make sure all the switches were in the right place and whatnot, because the kids would get in there, they'd flip things around. So we left the batteries disconnected, of course, so it didn't really hurt flipping the switches around, but we did have to go to Navy Dallas and Dallas to get a battery for one of the airplanes because it did go down somehow, so, to fly out of there. So I coordinated with the FAA to get the planes in and get us out, and that was a real good experience. I had a very good commander. He was a graduate of Texas A&M. He was a lieutenant colonel, Martin, and I was in the S3 shop. I got to fly a lot. I flew him most of the time, and it was really good. And then they changed the designation of the unit. We went to the 6th Aviation Brigade, which gave us a few more helicopters, you know, in the unit. And we had a tank unit there, the 2nd Armored Division, and so it was, you know, we'd battle each other back and forth during maneuvers out there in Fort Hood. And when the Apache came into the service, we tested a lot of the weapons and things that would go on the Apache for weight and balance and things like this before it ever went into service. So I was able to get on. I was also at Bell Helicopter in Textron in Dallas. I was there for 3 months as a pilot, and all we did was pre-flight airplanes and, you know, take a test flight and bring them back. But you only get to keep that job for like 3 months because they don't want people getting, you know, familiar with doing the procedure over and over again. They want to change it so people get a better outlook, or maybe, or somebody gets complacent doing the same thing, and I can understand that. So it was research and development there. And that was a good job. I had a good place to stay. And some of the better things, I had some fun R&Rs. I went to Taipei, and just good things. On the right, starting from right to left there, there's the Distinguished Flying Cross, then the Bronze Star Medal, which is the mostly red medal there, and then the Meritorious Service Medal is the third one over, and Air Medals is orange and blue, and then Army Commendation Medal, red, white, and blue, and the National Defense Ribbon, and then I think it starts over here on this side, and National Defense Good Conduct Medal, Vietnamese Service Medal, and Bronze Star, and silver over here. These are the Vietnam medals. And then I have a National Guard medal from being in the National Guard. And a ribbon. This is National Guard medal. This is Vietnam. That's Vietnam. This is Good Conduct medal.